I want to confirm that I am going to be the presidential candidate. And what you see behind me is the team that I'm going to work with in the forthcoming campaign.
The end of 2007 had seen a few piecemeal amendments to some of Zimbabwe's more repressive legislation. But as the 2008 election campaign kicked off, little appeared to have changed on the ground. With the all too familiar violent repression of opposition voices, it was generally accepted that any little legal reform was mere window dressing for propaganda purposes.
What has happened today is a decision of the politicians, not a decision of the police force. We are saying, Mugabe, you have failed the test. We have failed the test for a free and a fair election. If this is the reaction of this dictatorship, then elections are a farce.
They want to prepare the country, to prepare the world to accept their lies that the elections, if we win, will not have been free and fair.
Character as ZANU-PF is that it responds to the peaceful expression of the people through violence, greed and fraud and corruption, and defiance of national and international opinion.
We created democracy because we fought for one man, one vote here. He can keep his England and let me keep my Zimbabwe.
I don't foresee a situation where this very police can salute a change of government.
The defense and the security forces are up to the task in thwarting all threats of national security.
ZANU-PF is there to fight for the land and the rights of the people.
There is chaos on the land. Where is the chaos? There's multiple farm ownership.
I don't foresee a situation where this ZEC can actually announce the defeat of Mugabe.
But as the campaign progressed, it was generally agreed that although far from being fair, it was less violent than previous elections in independent Zimbabwe. On polling day, people were at least allowed to vote in what appeared to be a transparent manner. However, the inordinate delay in announcing the results fueled deep suspicion that the MDC and Morgan Tsvangirai were to be denied their clear victory.
A tsunami is breathing down our country. Hopefully, by 11 o'clock tomorrow, we'll be able to give you the total complete picture of the extent of the damage to ZANU-PF. We've won this election. We've won this election. These results are posted outside polling stations in terms of the law. So we are simply recording what is posted outside. We've got the results, the returns are out, and as I said in the morning, we would have announced the results in full. And we wait for them to announce their results on Tuesday, and we'll see whether, but between Sunday and Tuesday, those results would have mutated into something else.
While the opposition celebrated, the Electoral Commission took 5 days to announce the parliamentary results, revealing that the two MDC formations had deprived ZANU of its parliamentary majority. When the presidential results were finally announced, 5 weeks after the poll, they showed Tsvangirai the winner, but by an insufficient majority to give him outright victory. A runoff between him and Robert Mugabe was declared.
There's no money for a runoff. People are suffering. Instead of using that money for runoff, let's use that money to give people food to eat.
Already, a reign of terror was underway, unleashed in both urban and rural communities, which were identified by the results as being supportive of the MDC. Thousands had their homes and property vandalized. Livestock and foodstuffs were stolen or destroyed. Hundreds of men, women, and children suffered brutal physical attack, and 200 MDC activists and officials were confirmed murdered. Those who could fled, seeking asylum in the cities or further afield in the region. In the face of such overwhelming displacement and brutalization, the June 27th presidential runoff was boycotted by the MDC. The result, Mugabe, the winner of the one-horse race, was announced within hours of the vote and he was sworn in with immediate effect. But this time, not even Mugabe's staunchest supporters in SADC could ignore the brutality with which this result had been blatantly contrived. SADC decided that a negotiated settlement was the way forward if chaos were to be averted. With no cash in the banks, no food in the shops, no teachers, desks, books or chalk in the schools, no staff or drugs in hospitals and clinics, no water in the pipes, no power in the lines, and people reduced to gathering wild berries to survive, the population was in desperate need of a rescue plan. Brokered by SADC, talks between the parties began.
Well, I want just to say that President Beg is going to give a press statement, but I can say that we've got a deal.
On September the 15th, after protracted negotiations, a power-sharing document, the Global Political Agreement, was signed. Many were skeptical of this Kenyan-style arrangement. But for the first time since the formation of the MDC 9 years earlier, its supporters could openly celebrate their party's existence and legitimacy. Inside the building, however, the president's rhetoric was the same.
No one else has the right to decide on regime change in our country. It is the rights of our people.
I have signed this agreement because I believe it represents the best opportunity for us to build a peaceful, prosperous, democratic Zimbabwe. I have signed this agreement because my belief in Zimbabwe and its peoples runs deeper than the scars I bear from the struggle. I have signed this agreement because my hope for the future is stronger than the grief I feel for the needless suffering of the past year.
People's expectations were understandably high.
Just need fuel in Zimbabwe, just need food in Zimbabwe, just peace in Zimbabwe, we need peace.
We expect grain to come in bulk so that people will start to have enough food.
These expectations were not realized. The inclusive government was nowhere near to being formed, as there was an obvious reluctance of those still in power to implement the changes specified in the agreement. These included key appointments, notably those of the Reserve Bank Governor and the Attorney General. There was also the allocation of ministries.
The government has to be in place in order to deal with the issues that the country is facing. But you see, the problem is that having a good agreement with a bad guy is always something that you have to always watch your back. At the end of the day, reality will dawn on his mind that the only solution to the crisis facing the country is to dialogue.
Changira karonga kuchera matime karonga kuchera matime changira karonga kuchera matime yakanga yaoma mukabari busy wondo yeminda busy wondo yeminda kabari busy kumanya-manya kumanya-manya vanhu vakatanga kumanya-manya yakati yaronga kushungo ngavasungwe ngavasungwe kushungo ngavasungwe kushungo ngavasungwe.
A month after the signing, it was obvious that there were cavernous cracks in the deal. Again, the SADC Troika was called upon to mediate.
ZANU-PF breaching the memorandum of understanding left, right and center, the fact that they appointed senators, the fact that they appointed governors, the fact that they are still frustrating the movement of food and humanitarian assistance to the areas that deserve it, in clear breach of the memorandum of understanding.
For the general population, things were only getting worse. Years of neglect and corruption at all levels of government had left urban infrastructure in chaos. Water treatment plants no longer work, pipes have rotted and not been replaced, raw sewage flowing in the streets and in some cases contaminating the water supply is commonplace. This general decay, combined with a complete breakdown of medical services, meant that a cholera outbreak which started in October had spiraled out of control by the end of the year. It was denied from the top, and international medical help was therefore slow in getting to the victims. The next 6 months saw 5,000 cholera deaths countrywide, and countless unrecorded cases where the dead were buried untreated. At the beginning of December, there were clear signs of unprecedented civil disobedience and unrest on the streets of Harare. Apparently led by middle and low-ranking army personnel, it caught the usually repressive state security agents unable or unwilling to react. It was, however, a short-lived phenomenon, and the protesters quickly melted back into the never-ending bank queues. Cholera deaths were shooting up daily, and there was no obvious political solution on the horizon to the power-sharing impasse. If further evidence of political duplicity were needed, came the news of a wave of abductions and disappearances. At the end of October, 14 MDC activists and officials had been taken by state security agents from Banket. At the end of November and in early December, 2 senior MDC officials and Justina Mukoko, director of the Zimbabwe Peace Project, and 2 of her colleagues were abducted. Civics groups were alarmed.
The disappearance of Ms. Justina Mukoko, and to start ringing the alarm bells around this disappearance, because as of now, we don't know what is happening to her.
On December the 13th, a journalist was also abducted. It was noted that all the vehicles used in these abductions carried no number plates. In each case, homes and workplaces were searched by identified police and intelligence personnel. Court decisions ordering the police to produce the abductees were ignored, and it was feared that, as had happened with those who went missing in May and June, they would be found dead or not at all. Then, on December the 23rd, news began filtering through that Justina and a number of the others had been located in various police stations around the city of Harare.
Chief Superintendent Magwenzi himself confirmed to senior lawyers who spoke with him yesterday that he is the investigating officer in these cases and has all the missing persons in his custody in direct contravention of various court orders.
That the police have been involved in this right from the beginning. The 2 lawyers, Pumzani Ndlovu of the Attorney General's office and Chief Superintendent Zombe, who's a legal advisor to the police, specifically and categorically denied that the police knew where Justina was or where any of the other detainees were. And they specifically stated that they couldn't produce them because they did not believe that they had been lawfully taken. For the police to then turn around and have these people in their custody without actually coming back to us to say we found them at this place, they were held for these reasons, and to then deal with whoever had unlawfully taken them is a cause for concern because it shows complete breakdown of law and order from the very police who are supposed to enforce the law.
Many of the abductees had been severely tortured or had been deprived of food, despite orders from the courts for them to be released for medical attention, or were instead immediately incarcerated in the notorious Chikurubi maximum security prison. By mid-January, it appeared that the global political agreement, which had been heralded with such optimism 5 months earlier, was dead in the water. With inflation at an estimated several trillion %, a budget was presented to Parliament to howls of derision from members of all parties.
14,960 quintillion.
The Zimbabwe dollar was by now worthless, and it became legal to use foreign currency for those with access to it. By now, SADC was desperate to implement the agreement. Thousands of Zimbabweans were still pouring over the borders in a frantic bid for survival. On January the 27th, after a summit in Pretoria, it was announced that consensus on the outstanding issues had been reached. 3 days later, Tsvangirai made the announcement to a huge crowd anxiously waiting outside party headquarters.
The precipice that it is facing.
As the February the 11th inauguration date approached, civics groups did not share the enthusiasm.
First thing is they should have reread the global political agreement signed on the 15th of September and implement the letters and the spirit that goes within that law. Number one, they should withdraw all charges against human rights activists, release all human rights defenders who are in custody on trumped-up charges.
Law enforcement agents, most notably the prison service, continue to defy courts with no regard for public accountability.
Entering the government before the release of the abductees will be a grave betrayal of the people of Zimbabwe and their own, I'm talking about MDC, commitments, which they had shown through their resolution on the abductees.
The issue of abductees and political prisoners is a very important issue for us. We are hoping that, and we insist that these people will be released before the event tomorrow.
I, Morgan Richard Tsvangirai, do swear that I will be faithful and bear true allegiance to Zimbabwe and observe the laws of Zimbabwe. So help me God.
Not only were the detainees not released on February the 11th, they were not even brought to court.
Prisons were citing the fact that they do not have fuel. Now they suddenly no longer have fuel, but they had a large quantities to kidnap people.
As people made their way to the stadium to celebrate MDC's inclusion in government, the designated Deputy Minister of Agriculture, Roy Bennett, was hauled off a plane bound for Johannesburg and